It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
How many are honestly assessing the wider horizon? How many are looking in the opposite direction altogether, with eyes wide shut? Unfolding collapse of industrialized, militarized civilization and global ecological collapse are inseparable. Not a moment too soon. More and more are awakening to what's taking place in our skies. Geoengineering, the single most destructive operations ever deployed by the human race, and that's saying a lot. About the already unfolding collapse, from the New Zealand Herald, this headline, "Apocalypse Now, Doomsday Bunker Secretly Installed on New Zealand Property." This is only one example of many. From Yahoo News, let's keep going. Billionaire bolt holes inside the doomsday hideouts of the super rich. On the same theme, consider this new headline from MSN. The secret escapes of billionaires, from bunkers to secure compounds. For the record, there's no place to hide from what's coming if we remain on this trajectory. From the MSN report, in preparation for the worst, the super rich have been investing in secure estates and luxury property in some of the most remote locations across the globe. Far from the bright lights of New York City or London, the top 1% will be hunkering down in the wilderness of New Zealand, the Scottish Highlands, or on islands in the middle of the Pacific. Let's stop there. Even now, so many ask why. Why are the billionaires building bunkers in some of the most remote places on the planet? Here's my question. How is the answer to that question not shockingly obvious at this point? Forests, fisheries, farming, livestock, wildlife, insects, plankton, all are already free-falling toward total collapse. What is taking place in our skies is further fueling all of it. For those that don't yet realize it, we, the human race, are circling the drain. If we collectively remain on the current course, the carbon fuel carnival will very soon be over. Ecological collapse is what holds our collective futures in the balance. The rest is a scripted theater of mass distraction. Bottom line, no functional environment, no life, no people, no civilization, game over. If there's a silver lining to total collapse, climate engineering will end with it. From the UK Daily Mail, RFK Jr.'s running mate claims America has a top secret program spraying chemicals into the air. From the report, Robert F. Kennedy's VP running mate, Nicole Shanahan, 39, posted a video on X, which many have seen, but this report is new, where she pointed out several, quote, contrails, saying geoengineering should not happen without a referendum with full and accurate disclosure. First, how does this author know what Shanahan saw in the sky? Obviously, they don't. Shanahan was referring to solar geoengineering, which is a field of research on how to cool the planet to combat climate changes. Let's keep going. David Keith, a professor of geophysical sciences at the University of Chicago, told the UK Daily Mail that Shanahan's claims are not solar geoengineering because it is, quote, an idea, not a thing that's being implemented in practice, end quote. Stop. For the record, Dr. David Keith, bring his name up often, he is the face of climate engineering disinformation and criminal climate engineering cover-up. The report continues. Keith said there are risks of injecting sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere from mortality risk, temperature, air pollution, and ozone loss. Let's stop again. Yes, Dr. Keith. But not just risk, ongoing reality, all of it, including the unfolding functional collapse of our life-sustaining ozone layer. Anyone that's even slightly awake can feel the intense direct sunlight burning their skin. Even DNA-damaging UVC radiation is now reaching Earth's surface. Not speculation, a state-of-the-art metering proven fact, which anyone can research if they search the ozone destruction section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. The destruction to the ozone layer is an existential threat all by itself, an extremely near-term existential threat. Climate engineering aerosol dispersions and the frequency transmissions that are used to manipulate the aerosols are the core source of ozone layer damage. Not the only source, but the core causal factor. The Daily Mail report continues with more statements from Dr. David Keith. Quote, sulfate aerosol air pollution is a leading cause of environmental mortality worldwide. So, Keith says, it is one of the most obvious risks of sulfate geoengineering. You think what you spray in the sky comes down to the surface where we all get to inhale it. And these are not benign elements: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, polymer fibers, surfactants, graphene. The list goes on. And what else is there? We can't know. If you don't know what you're looking for, it's very difficult to find, and God only knows what they're dispersing on us at any given moment. Keith continues, sulfate aerosols can also damage the ozone layer. Too late for that, already done. Causing an increase in mortality from skin cancers. Much worse than that. Can't grow food, slaughters plankton, insects, all of which is already happening right now. 80 to 90% decline in insects globally. That's terrestrial and aquatic. Plankton down 90% of the Atlantic, other oceans not far behind. The basis for life on Earth is disintegrating. Climate engineering, a core part of it, not the only part. I've never said that. I'll never say that. Obviously, any form of human activity that is destructive, that affects the planet's life support systems and the energy balance, is all a part of the problem. But the intentional intervention, worst part of all. If we do not fix that hole in the bottom of the boat goes down, period. He said he concluded that with these three risks on the table, he and his colleagues have found that, in their opinion, the reduction in mortality from cooling, which they consider a benefit, is roughly 10 times larger than the increase in mortality from air pollution and ozone loss. A harm. Of course it's a harm. Really, Dr. Keith? After over 75 years of covert global climate engineering operations, how's it working out so far? Given the fact that the human race and all life on Earth is on an extremely near-term trajectory toward planetary omnicide. The author of the UK Daily Mail report is Stacey Liberatore, Liberatore. Perhaps Stacey should be sent a link to the dimming from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org and asked peacefully and professionally to tell the whole truth on this most dire issue. About JFK's running mate, Nicole Shanahan, my deepest gratitude to her for her courageously speaking out. Several weeks ago, Nicole interviewed me on video for an hour. Hopefully, she'll post that exchange soon. Please show your support for Nicole. We desperately need voices like hers in this battle. About engineering chemical cooldowns, now almost always followed by weather whiplash record rebound warm-ups. Example, Gulf Coast blizzards followed by record heat. First, engineering winter. From the Washington Post, why the U.S. has been home to Earth's most unusually cold air this year. This is an ongoing story with more and more people admitting to what I stated on the record. When these events were happening, they would be followed by record warm-ups, and they were, because these events were completely unnatural, completely engineered. Chemical ice nucleation was what is the core factor behind New Orleans blizzards, Florida blizzards. While it was above freezing and raining in Alaska, Greenland, Iceland, Siberia, Moscow, but you won't hear that from any of the Matrix media sources. They'll focus only on the engineered winter weather events. Let's keep going. The Washington Post report then states, lobes of the polar vortex, like an octopus's tentacles, have frequently lashed the United States this year. Yes, the tentacles of the climate engineering octopus. That's the deeper and hidden in plain sight reality, no pun intended. Let's correct the Washington Post's deception. Round after round of chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations have, quote, lashed the U.S. this year, aka winter weather warfare. Shallow layers of chemically cooled air, providing the climate engineers and their controllers the super sensationalized headlines they need to continue confusing and dividing the general population in regard to the true extent of climate damage already done, and the abrupt climate collapse scenario that's already unfolding and accelerating by the day, with climate engineering further fueling the process. More on the climate engineering cover-up. From CNN, the polar vortex is acting weird and the U.S. is paying the price this winter. From the CNN report, it's really, really cold again, it says, as the U.S. shivers through at least the 8th blast of air from the Arctic this winter. CNN continues, January was the warmest on record for the globe, by far, by the way, and in a vast expanse of global warmth, the U.S. sticks out like a cold, sore thumb. That's exactly true. I stated this on a previous broadcast. If you look at the departure from normal temperature maps for the entire globe for January, it's all red except for the one blue spot of chemical cold temperatures in parts of the U.S. CNN continues, scientists say it's being caused by a misbehaving polar vortex combining with key weather patterns that seem to be stuck in place. Really, CNN. A quote, misbehaving polar vortex. Bad polar vortex. Bad. Go sit in the corner. And never mind the climate engineering operations raging in our skies that anyone but those that have their eyes wide shut should easily be able to see and decipher. Moving on, AP News recently said the following. They had a different count than CNN. 10th and chilliest polar vortex this winter. 8, 10, who's counting? Anyway, there's more than enough chemically engineered winter weather to go around, right? The kind that creates an unnatural and biting cold and sometimes even smells of chemicals. And there's that ground fog that seems so incredibly pervasive and expansive now in so many parts of the country. But what about the following? From NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a denial of sorts. Is this why their funding has just been slashed? From NOAA, this headline, quote, this cold air, question mark, it's probably not the polar vortex. That's interesting, isn't it? The NOAA report continues. The truth is, they say, while the stratosphere has been doing some interesting stretching and wobbling, think HAARP ionosphere heater, manipulating upper level wind currents, there's just not much evidence, NOAA says, that the polar vortex is really the main driver of our winter weather so far this year. Okay, so that sounds a bit vague. Is someone not telling the truth? Then what is the main driver of the winter weather whiplash chemical cooldowns? Search and review the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. You won't like what you learn. Hard data, verifiable facts. Look if you dare. And about NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration employees, beginning to allude to the truth, possibly from MSN. Let's add this. Hundreds of weather forecasters fired in latest wave of DOGE cuts. From the report, hundreds of weather forecasters and other federal, national, oceanic, and atmospheric administration employees were fired. Lawmakers and weather experts said layoffs included meteorologists who do critical forecasts in the National Weather Service offices across the country. Question, what might be the actual objective or agenda behind the gutting of NOAA? Here's a point to ponder. These are exactly the category of experts that may finally be reaching the point of rage, that may actually be summoning a bit of moral fortitude that could possibly prompt them to speak out about the climate engineering assault, if only they were given whistleblower protection. Second question, will the new administration provide whistleblower protection to National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration scientists and National Weather Service scientists? And if not, why not? For the record, I had a NOAA scientist state to my face, quote, we all know about geoengineering operations, but we're afraid to speak out. We have no First Amendment rights, end quote. And of course, there is that detail of the illegal federal gag order on all National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and National Weather Service operations. Whistleblower protection on the record and publicly disclosed. That is what is needed for any and all that are willing to come out of the shadows and tell the truth once and for all about the ongoing climate engineering onslaught. About the whiplash warm-ups, a reminder of this recent article from Fox News. Weather whiplash expected for millions across the U.S., with some places seeing 90-degree temperature swings. Stop and think about that. 90-degree temperature swings from the low to the high over the course of days. Why are so few alarmed? Why are so many still completely caught up in political theater while the ship goes down, literally, aka planet Earth? And it just keeps going. From AccuWeather, topsy-turvy pattern to dish out warmth and cold, rain and snow to the northeast. Warm and cold in the same region. Yeah, that makes sense. If climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation operations are considered, the AccuWeather report continues with this. Although temperatures are rising across the east, Mother Nature They use that term so much now. It's part of the script to just hammer that into people so that they can discount what they see with their own eyes in the sky. They say Mother Nature will serve up stormy conditions for the Midwest and Northeast this week. Temperatures will fluctuate from one day to the next, AccuWeather states. Again, yes, temperatures will fluctuate wildly depending on how much atmospheric moisture there is for the chemical ice nucleation climate engineering operations. From AccuWeather, new Santa Ana event to spur record warmth in Southern California. Question, are yet more firestorms being scheduled? We'll soon enough find out. Same theme, weather and temperature whiplash on the other side of the world, from phys.org. Japan warns of avalanches, icy roads ahead of more snow. Keep in mind, heavily industrialized countries like Japan have lots of jets, lots of chemical ice nucleation, climate engineering capabilities, even if the rest of the world is spiraling into total meltdown. More breaking reports in a moment on global weather weirding and chemical ice nucleation. But first this, from AFP, a dose of climate engineering cover-up and damage control. Here's the headline. Proposed weather control bans surge across U.S. states. Author, Manon Jacob, Manon Jacob. Remember that name. Let's keep going. From the report, fake stories saying that atmospheric experiments are triggering natural disasters that would mean they aren't natural anymore, wouldn't it, Manon? Have led U.S. states pushing blanket bans on weather modification, which experts say may jeopardize current local scientific programs. Sounds a bit like an admission of sorts. The report continues. Lawmakers are moving to criminalize legitimate scientific experiments in the atmosphere. Does that not sound a bit like an admission of sorts? More from the report. None of this is government control, said Mr. Shane Hollanday, a meteorologist at the Kentucky Climate Center. It's all Mother Nature, he told AFP, of the roller coaster of a month, weather-wise. Yeah, right. Just Mother Nature. Nothing to see here. Move along. There's more. Professor Edward Parson, who teaches environmental law at the University of California, Los Angeles, said such legislation bills often seek to, quote, prohibit something that is not happening, end quote. Wait, stop. Did I miss something? The report first states that states banning climate engineering would interfere with legitimate atmospheric science experiments, and now they say it's not happening at all? Which is it? Report then says, as global warming makes weather extremes more likely, each new natural disaster brings further pushback against weather control from an increasingly loud crowd, including prominent political figures. They admit to it, they deny it, they admit to it, they deny it. Stop. Is that what we are? Those of us that are not okay with being sprayed 24/7 with highly toxic atmospheric destroying chemicals and elements were a, quote, loud crowd? Well, good. Now we know they're hearing us. Let's keep banging the drums as loudly as we can. AFP continues, blanket bans also run the risk of hindering projects shown to be beneficial to farmers by managing local precipitation and reducing crop losses from hail. Stop there. What did he just say? Less hail? What planet are these people on? Crop-crushing extreme hail events from chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding operations are now so bad that insurance companies are canceling policies because of it. It's ruining cars, solar fields, crops, and everything in between. So, again, the report quotes experts who say it isn't happening, and then they say it is happening. Projects shown to benefit farmers, they say, end quote. Really? Again, I ask, how's that going so far? With crops crashing around the world, flash freezes, freak extreme hailstorms, flash drought, flash floods, sterilized soils from toxic climate engineering fallout. Yeah, sounds like it's truly benefiting the farmers, the forests, and everything in between, right? Well, the planet and all life on it circles the drain. More from AFP. These state legislations feel a little bit like a knee-jerk reaction. That's from Professor Deborah Sivas, S-I-V-A-S, who teaches environmental law at Stanford University. All these people need to have a link to the Deming. Write it professionally, peacefully, CC as many other aware activists as you can, involve them in the conversation, keep them to account. Stanford University professor Deborah Sivas continues with this while cautioning that regulation around larger geoengineering experiments may prove necessary on an international scale. Yes, there it is. Climate engineering, planetary omnicide might need to be deployed and regulated, and it would look exactly like what we see in our skies with exactly the same catastrophic health, weather, and environmental consequences that we have now. But we're expected to believe, because the so-called experts and matrix media journalists tell us so, that we're not actually seeing what we're actually seeing. And all the toxic climate engineering elements showing up in hundreds of precipitation lab tests from all over the world aren't actually there because they say so. Final excerpt from AFP. Miss Dana Wilbanks of Columbia University's Climate Science Legal Defense Fund is tracking science silencing initiatives nationwide. Stop. Conclusion from AFP and author Manon Jacob. Legislation that pushes back on operations which are spraying us like lab rats 24/7 are, quote, science silencing. How's that for another chapter in the planetary asylum? Again, perhaps Manon Jacob should be sent a link to the dimming and asked why he isn't reporting truthfully. Openly CC, again, as many other aware and awake individuals as you can, not just this article, but anything you could find on environmental or climate science, anything, or farm groups, ag groups, fisheries, the list is endless. But CC as many aware and awake individuals as you can, openly CC them, send them a link to the dimming documentary, and ask them to address the information contained in our groundbreaking documentary from geoengineeringwatch.org. Indisputable proof of these operations ongoing, 25 million views and counting in spite of social media censorship of that documentary. So forgive me for beating a dead horse here, but aren't so-called journalists like Manon Jacob responsible to the public? A responsibility to tell the truth, which doesn't include covering the tracks of the climate engineers and their controllers for a paycheck and a pension. That's not okay. Question: will a fully awakened and justifiably outraged population hold dishonest journalists legally and morally responsible for the parts they've played in the criminal cover-up of climate engineering operations? Time will soon tell. On the same theme of not okay, small-scale weather modification operations are absolutely not climate engineering. I've been over this many times, but it needs to be said again. Search and view this Geoengineering Watch report headline on that issue. Climate engineering and regional weather modification, understanding the difference, from that report. A recent routine publication in a Southern California newspaper about a localized small-scale weather modification program was touted by many as an admission to geoengineering programs. This is not the case. Though any form of weather climate modification on any scale is harmful to the environment overall and the climate system, the small-scale localized weather modification programs, which are routinely and openly conducted around the world, are only used as a tool to distract populations from the inconceivably larger and more destructive global climate engineering assault. The small-scale programs in question are virtually meaningless against the backdrop of the ongoing global climate engineering assault. Credibility is absolutely essential if we're to gain ground in this all-important fight. Recent circulations of online posts falsely claim that small-scale weather modification pilots were, quote, chemtrails whistleblowers, but they're not. Again, any form of environmental modification is a problem, but to compare localized weather modification with global climate engineering operations is to compare an ant with an elephant. The elements are completely different, and the application is exponentially larger, inconceivably larger with climate engineering operations. The small-scale operations are only meant by the controllers, again, as a distraction, and it seems they've worked all too well in that capacity. Some of the same sources that have incorrectly combined these two very different forms of environmental modification as if they were the same also routinely post photos as proof of climate engineering that have absolutely nothing to do with climate engineering. One example I see commonly on these posts: a firefighting jet aircraft releasing a belly dump of water or retardant very near ground level. Absolutely a completely incorrect representation of climate engineering, but such sources and sites don't seem to care, even though posting such incorrect information does considerable harm to the credibility of the cause of exposing and halting climate engineering operations. One more example. Photos of a jet aircraft interior that's filled with beer keg-sized canisters as if that's a geoengineering jet interior. It isn't. These are ballast testing canisters. Again, credibility is critically important if we're to move this fight forward. Building bridges with as of yet unaware groups instead of burning bridges with the same groups due to a lack of credibility. A final note. So many of the same sources pushing completely incorrect data, images, and conclusions are also constantly soliciting for funds. Constant tin cup rattling is also discrediting and counterproductive to the cause. Please forgive my rant, but these points are important and worth considering. Moving on, increasingly severe weather whiplash from sfgate.com. Quote, big jump coming to Bay Area weather forecast. They say by midweek temperatures are expected to rise as much as 10 to 15 degrees above normal for this time of year as a strong high pressure ridge settles over the southwestern U.S. Think of it like a heat event we saw last July. That's from the report. But wait, it's still winter. Why should we compare this heat wave to something that happened in July? And this is an ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure dome that's used to steer the upper-level wind currents clockwise around that dome. Part of steering the jet stream connects to all the, quote, polar vortex reports already mentioned. And for the record, nighttime low temperatures uniformly are rising twice as fast as daytime highs, with climate engineering making it all worse overall, not better. None of this bodes well for the fate of the human race. From USA Today, fire-battered Los Angeles prepares for weather whiplash. Again. From the LA Times, 90 degrees in February, question mark. Record-breaking temperatures could warm SoCal this week. They did. From Fox Weather, a parallel headline to one mentioned earlier in this broadcast, weather whiplash expected for millions across the U.S., with some places seeing 90-degree temperature swings. From Yahoo News, scientists sound alarm over record-smashing global findings. Here's what's happening. That's the headline. While Americans were living through a cold snap this past January, global temperatures as a whole smashed records, and not in a good way. These are ongoing reports. I know in previous broadcasts I've mentioned similar reports. These are ongoing, more and more sources now admitting to what most Americans don't know, at least not yet. The dates of January 14th through the 22nd saw record high global temperatures, a feat even more alarming considering the Arctic blast that pummeled much of North America over the same period. Again, this is chemically nucleated cloud moisture. That's the, quote, Arctic blast. Yes, they're manipulating jet streams as well, but when you have moisture pouring off the record warm Gulf of Mexico or America, whatever suits you, that's not a winter storm in any natural historical sense. And that moisture is nucleated. You have an ice storm in the transition zone between the warm atmospheric moisture and the, quote, winter storm, which they theatrically name at the Weather Channel to make it more sensationalized. This is a circus of the absurd. I don't know how these people look themselves in the mirror. I truly don't. I don't know how they sleep at night. But this issue will be exposed, and they'll have one hell of a lot of explaining to do. Yes, the Arctic blast, the polar vortex, which the soon-to-be-fired NOAA scientists say wasn't actually a polar vortex, which again begs the question, what caused the flash freeze cooldowns? I've been over that. Search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to find out. On the bottom side of the Americas, from the UK Guardian, weather tracker temperatures hit record highs across South America. They say, while North America grappled with widespread cold and wintry conditions, South America, now in its final month of summer, faced the opposite extreme with record high temperatures recorded across the continent. This is an ongoing story as well. The report says in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil's second largest city, temperatures soared to 44 degrees C last Monday, and that's 14 degrees C above the February norm. That's high 20s, almost 30 degrees above normal. Authorities activated a level 4 heat protocol as a result of the extreme heat. Again, ongoing story. In addition to the high temperatures, Rio has also experienced what is expected to be one of the driest Februaries on record. The intense heat across South America has largely been driven by high-pressure zones situated over the southern Atlantic. Think ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes again, which has allowed air to sink, compress, and warm as it travels toward southern parts of the continent. Final excerpt from this report. In contrast to the high temperatures in Brazil and Argentina, temperatures in Canada's Saskatchewan province plunged into the negative 40s. They're just mentioning that as a snapshot of the contrast here. More from the South American meltdown from AFP. Paint them white. How Brazil is keeping trains on the tracks. Report says few people suspect that when they board a train during a heat wave, they may be risking their lives, as high temperatures can warp tracks. They do warp tracks, and maybe even cause the train to derail. They do. Last week, a train in the Brazilian state of Rio de Janeiro derailed after the tracks expanded and buckled after being heated to a sizzling 71 degrees Celsius. That's 160 degrees Fahrenheit by the sun. This is just one example. Roads, bridges, airport runways are also buckling in the extreme heat and penetrating extreme UV radiation. Final excerpt from the UFP report. Meanwhile, Central and Eastern Africa are facing extreme heat as well, an ongoing heat wave. Question, how many Americans have any idea what's going on around the world while scripted political theater is being dished up by Matrix Media day after day after day? Next, another deeply alarming report from Africa, where the powers that shouldn't be can conduct biological experiments with total impunity. From ABC News, over 60 deaths linked to, quote, unknown disease in Congo. And one report stated that death can occur from this new unknown disease in as little as 48 hours. That doesn't sound good, does it? Again, I ask, what are the hundreds of biolabs around the world up to? You decide. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the bad news broadcast, installment number 499. 499 weeks in a row. Never missed a broadcast. I will stay at my post until I can't. March 1st, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes and proves the climate engineering atrocities, available on our homepage for free, of course. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. How do we reach those that still aren't looking up? Start a conversation. Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials can be found on our homepage. Excellent key to the door. If these don't work, they're probably not going to wake up anytime soon. Our only goal, to provide activists what they need to move this fight forward as fast as possible. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images. We pass these printed materials on for less than our overall cost of producing and shipping. Our only mission. Bring these programs to light and to a halt while there's still some part of the planet's life support systems to salvage. We have Geoengineering Watch hoodies, shirts, photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards. Takes you right to The Dimming or right to our homepage. Nobody refuses these cards. They're very effective, very easy to carry. Bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Reaching a critical mass, only way forward in this fight, but it will take all of us to reach that critical mass. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. When those who are participating in this insanity, our military brothers and sisters, understand they are literally participating in their own near-term demise and that of their posterity. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photo to us so we can post it as part of our activist compilation that's now part of our materials page. The images do encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, you have my deepest gratitude forever. Thank you. Moving on, random reports from around the world, because so much is unfolding, it's impossible to cover it all. Forgive the shotgun approach, but I'm desperately trying to cover as much as I can in the time I have in this on-air radio broadcast. From the Weather Channel Climate Engineering Cover-Up Organization, India's wheat crop at risk as warm weather persists. Not just the warm weather, toxic rain, extreme UV, a condition called VPD, vapor pressure deficit, when atmospheric chemistry has been altered to this degree. Organisms from crops to forests shut their stomata, their respiratory ports. They're not absorbing carbon. They're not releasing oxygen. They're not feeding. There's a cascade of effects here that are creating crop loss around the world. Back to this report on India. Concerns are rising about food security and potential government intervention. The combination of extreme weather conditions and dwindling stockpiles has put the country's wheat output in question. In the U.S., from MSN, distressed farmers sound the alarm as they face whiplash growing conditions. Again, it's across the board, wreaking havoc on everything. Look up, connect the dots. From extremetemps.com, Middle East winter freeze and scorching heat. Do those two conditions belong together? The report says extreme contrast between wintry cold spell and record heat. Same all over. From Telesur TV, Ecuador declares emergency due to heavy rains. Geoengineering drought deluge scenarios, hallmark of climate engineering operations. Again, I'm not stating there's not other factors affecting the climate. I say this over and over and over. I've never denied that. We've trashed the planet in the geologic blink of an eye from too many directions to even begin to consider on this 1-hour radio broadcast. But the bottom line is the climate engineering elephant in the equation is being systematically omitted and denied by all official sources, all matrix media, so-called academia, criminal denial. Moving on, next from the UK Guardian, plants losing appetite for carbon dioxide amid effects of warming climate. The whole of atmospheric chemistry has been radically altered from countless forms of human activity. Climate engineering at the top of the list, but by no means the only piece of the puzzle. The report states our planet is losing its appetite for mopping up carbon dioxide. Analysis of atmospheric carbon dioxide measurements show that Earth's plant and soils reached peak carbon dioxide sequestration in 2008, and absorption has been declining ever since. Passing this tipping point increases the chances of runaway climate breakdown. There's not a chance of it. We are neck deep in it, and there's about 50 feedback loops already triggered. This is one. Think about that. The vast majority have absolutely no idea the severity and immediacy of what's unfolding, and that is the point I'm trying desperately to drive home before we hit the wall at full velocity. From extremetemps.com, more and more February warmth records in the eternal record warmth in northern Norway. How many Americans know that? But what about this? Kuwait is experiencing its coldest day in 6 decades as an intense Siberian cold wave grips the country. The extreme cold front has shattered long-standing temperature records for this time of year. This is Kuwait's New Orleans blizzard. Kuwait with loads of money, loads of aircraft, and loads of chemical ice nucleation to convince their citizens that it's okay to drill, baby, drill forever and keep building massive megacities in the sand, literally. It's all temporary. And those that refuse to believe this very soon won't have a choice. From AOL, record amount of sea effect snow piled high in Japan, and more is on the way. This is a follow-up to the headline I covered earlier in this broadcast. It's just like the manipulated lake effect engineered snow conveyor that's used by the geoengineers in the U.S. They blow wind across a warm body of water, chemically nucleate it, and pile up the snow. It's a giant snow-making machine. Don't eat that snow, and I don't say that in jest. From newsonjapan.com, severe cold wave hits Japan, sees nearly 5 meters of snow following Japan's hottest year on record. Yeah, that makes sense. It does if you consider chemical ice nucleation operations. More on weather whiplash from extremetemps.com. Historic heat wave will impact the whole of East Asia with hundreds of records. Record heat, record chemical snow, followed by more record heat. Welcome to the world of climate engineering. From KyotoNews.com, over 80 homes lost as wildfire spreads in northeast Japan. When the fire broke out, they say strong wind and dry air warnings were in place in the area. Sounds a whole lot like exactly before the LA fires, doesn't it? And wait, what happened to the record 5 meters of snow in Japan, in the north of Japan as well? Welcome to climate engineering again. Some wider horizon reports. For the record, in the desperate and dangerous attempt to mask what these reports are disclosing, climate engineering is making it all far worse, not better. From CNN, ice that took roughly 2,000 years to form on Mount Everest has melted in 25 years, which means it has thinned at about 80 times the rate than it took to form this ice. If that doesn't alarm you, it should. The same is taking place at the poles. Footnote, there's more than enough denial on all sides of the fence. Far too many that have awakened to the climate engineering atrocities, unfortunately and very incorrectly, deny other forms of damage to the planet or that the planet's damaged at all. It's completely incorrect. It's irreparably damaged at this point. Also, unfortunately, the vast majority of anthropogenic climate damage believers deny climate engineering. Solution: how to build bridges instead of burning them. Stick to the following compass heading. No matter what anyone's opinion or conclusion is regarding the state of the climate, there can be no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost acknowledging and addressing the climate engineering issue, period. Please keep that compass heading, and we will make far more progress in this battle. Moving on. Multiple sources. We may have lost control, the melting ice sheets, and what happens next. No, not may, not could, not may, not might. We have lost control radically. And climate engineers, in their attempt to double down on their insanity, are making it worse by the day. This report states, scientists now believe significant melting of the ice sheets is inevitable. What does this mean for everyday life and the planet? The North Pole and the Antarctic ice sheets wrapped around the southern pole. Together, they play a crucial role in regulating the climate. They stabilize sea levels by storing 99% of Earth's fresh water, by the way. The poles moderate surface temperatures by reflecting over 80% of solar radiation. It's actually close to 90%. The seawater then, when the ice is gone, absorbs 90%, radically accelerating the warming. They recirculate nutrient-rich waters that sustain marine life via the Atlantic Ocean currents, which are starting to shut down. These ice sheets are melting before our eyes. The report states since 1901, they've lost 49,000 gigatons of ice, enough to cover the continental United States in an ice sheet 22 feet high. Stop and think about that. 49,000 gigatons, enough to cover the entire continental U.S. in 22 feet of ice. For the record, the heat-trapping properties of climate engineering aerosols are part of the following equation: a runaway greenhouse effect. And that occurs when a planet's atmosphere contains greenhouse gases in an amount sufficient to block thermal radiation from leaving the planet, preventing the planet from cooling. Climate engineering aerosols, again, contributing to that equation, and from having liquid water on its surface. This is what believed to happen on Venus. A runaway version of the greenhouse effect can be defined by a limit on a planet's outgoing long-wave radiation. This is a feedback loop, which means the planet cannot cool down through long-wave radiation and continues to heat up until it can radiate outside of the absorption bands of the water vapor. But unfortunately, by the time that would happen on the current trajectory, life on Earth would be long gone. But some in so-called climate science communities continue to deny that such a scenario could ever take place. Unfortunately, the process has already begun. Climate engineering operations, in the effort to hide what's unfolding and to use weather as a weapon, is further fueling this process, driving more and more nails into our collective coffins. Moving on from climatecasino.com, global sea ice continues to set new record daily lows. If you don't believe that, I understand. There's more than enough disinformation out there and people with vested interests like Al Gore, but that doesn't change reality. Please take the time to view the film Chasing Ice. Shocking film footage, no political agenda, and it's far worse than even what that film shockingly shows. It's gotten far worse since then. Find it online, Chasing Ice. From popularscience.com, Greenland's lakes are getting uglier and fast. That's the headline. The transformation could be permanent. Yes, it is. They found profound differences between 2023 water and prior years. Iron levels shot up by 2 orders of magnitude, and other metals like aluminum, keep that in mind, and cobalt were also more abundant. What's that doing on the top of the glaciers? Look up. You'll find your answer. It would take about 1,000 years, the report says, for that kind of change in color to happen naturally. Researchers stated that they never thought such a dramatic change could happen in less than a year. We are in a runaway event from so many directions, and climate engineering stoking that fire radically, and the controllers will not let go of it. Keep that in mind. They will not willingly let go of the covert weapon of climate engineering, aka weather warfare. Moving on from the UK Independent, climate conditions caused unexpected changes in more than a third of 24,000 U.S. lakes. From that report, rising temperatures and nutrient pollution allows for the growth of algal blooms that can impact drinking water, not can, does drastically, and kill wildlife. Climate change, they say, is fueling dangerous algae blooms, which cost millions, close popular beaches at thousands of lakes across the U.S. All 50 states are impacted by nutrient pollution, with about 15,000 bodies of water facing nutrient-related problems. Question: what core component is absent from this report? Climate engineering operations and their toxic fallout contaminating every single drop of rain, thus virtually all surface bodies of water, no exceptions. And here's a reminder of a report I covered on a previous broadcast: 500 locations tested throughout the U.S. for freshwater fish, and eating one of those freshwater fish. Again, 500 locations, wild-caught fish, eating one would be equivalent to drinking a month's worth of toxic water, tainted water, I think the report called it. Think about that. Nowhere to hide. Bird flu update from goodmenproject.com. On the front lines against bird flu, egg farmers say they're losing the battle. Question: how long till new and improved strains of this pathogen are let loose on human populations? You decide. From the UK Independent, egg prices expected to rise more than 40% in 2025. That's certainly conservative. From AccuWeather, more same subject. To help solve its egg price crisis, America is turning to Turkey, the country. Turkey plans to export 420 million eggs to the United States this year. For the record, the time is fast approaching when we'll be lucky if we can even buy eggs. Don't believe it? You will. Bouncing back to our drastically tainted environment, from wildfiretoday.com, massive lead spike in Los Angeles air during wildfires, CDC says. Thousands of Los Angeles residents fled their communities in January as the Palisades Fire and Eaton fires neared their homes. While they escaped the dangers of the flames, another danger was spewed into the air, affecting countless other people. Airborne lead levels in the city were 110 times higher than usual during the wildfires. That's according to a new report from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And if they're telling you that much, it's way worse still. The health effects from the lead-heavy emissions won't be specifically known for some time. Not very reassuring there. Lead levels affect nearly every human organ, accumulate in teeth and bones, and pose significant health risks, especially for children who are more vulnerable to the element's neurodevelopmental effects. Doesn't sound good. And there are many more pollutants they're not even mentioning here, of course. But it's worse than all that. Let's rewind to this past report from UNEP.org. Air pollution linked to, quote, huge reduction in intelligence. The study also suggests that air pollution increases the risk of degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. The study implies that the effect on social welfare could be much larger than previously thought. Across the board, everything regarding human health, environmental everything, climate everything is, oops, it's worse than we thought. Across the board. How long does anyone think that can continue before we hit the wall at full velocity? And why is it much worse than we thought? It's much worse than we were being told. Because there is no honor, no honesty, no courage, no morality in almost any arena of so many segments of so-called society. What in the world is wrong with so many in the ranks of the human race? Academia, agencies, media, elected officials, environmental groups, spiritual organizations, and the general population, far too few are willing to even hear the truth, let alone to fully face it. It is generally very difficult to break belief systems because they provide a sense of comfort, stability, and meaning, and are deeply ingrained from early life experiences. Belief systems can and generally are reinforced by social groups and can trigger strong emotional responses like fear or anxiety when challenged, making it difficult to let go of them, even if they're no longer serving them well. Key reasons why belief systems are hard to change: early socialization. Many core beliefs are formed during childhood through family, friends, and cultural influences becoming deeply embedded in our subconscious. Cognitive dissonance. When presented with information contradicting a held belief, people may dismiss it or reinterpret it to maintain consistency in their own personal worldview. Emotional attachment. Beliefs can be linked to strong emotions like security, belonging, or identity, making it uncomfortable to question them. Fear of the unknown. Stepping outside a familiar belief system can feel uncertain and unsettling, leading to resistance to change. Social pressure, also a factor. Belonging to a group that strongly holds certain beliefs can discourage individuals from expressing dissenting opinions. There's confirmation bias. People tend to seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. How to potentially challenge a belief system. Self-reflection. Actively examine your own beliefs, identifying their origins and potential negative and incorrect impacts. Seek diverse perspectives. Expose yourself to viewpoints different from your own to broaden your own understanding. Critical thinking. Evaluate the evidence and logic behind your beliefs and conclusions. Question your assumptions. What an absolutely stunning example climate intervention operations are in all of this. This shockingly obvious atrocity in our skies, and yet so few seem to see it because it simply does not fit into their framework of reality. That's how powerful this psychological conditioning is. And those in control of the matrix know all too well how to manipulate these human traits. When fear spreads through a group, emotional contagion can cause an irrational escalation of beliefs and actions. Experiments on conformity demonstrate that group pressure can significantly distort an individual's perception of reality. When group identity is threatened, whether by external factors like political upheaval or internal factors like ideological conflicts, individuals may adhere to irrational beliefs or actions to maintain their sense of belonging. This desire for group cohesion can override rational decision-making processes, leading to a phenomenon like groupthink. People are more likely to believe and share information when it aligns with their pre-existing beliefs, a phenomenon known as echo chambers. The impact of artificial intelligence and other technologies also raises new concerns about the manipulation of public perception. As these technologies advance, the boundaries between reality and fiction become increasingly blurred, creating fertile ground for collective irrationality to flourish, which doesn't bode well given the horizon that we now collectively face. Here's a headline example from Salon.com: How America Will Collapse by 2025. This report was published in 2010. It seems we're now there. The coming weeks and months will bring great challenges and great desperation from the powers that shouldn't be, that are now more dangerous than ever before. False flag events, pathogen releases, global conflict, and weather warfare. Just some of the cards held by the manipulators of the Matrix. The forest and wilderness which surrounds my off-grid home in Northern California was teeming with life only 20 years ago. Now the silence is deafening. The decline of this former paradise across the board is beyond horrifying to witness. How can it be that so many don't have or want a clue about what's unfolding around them? Yet there is still life, innocent life, fighting to survive. And so long as there is, we must press on in the all-important battle to salvage what is yet left of the miraculous web of life on which all of our lives completely and totally depend. Do we not owe our lives to that web of life and to our posterity, which has no future on the current course? Not opinion, not speculation, not hypothesis, statistical certainty. The first and most important leap we can make in the right direction at this late hour is to fully expose and halt global climate engineering operations and all that they entail. Each of us, all of us, must decide for ourselves what we will do with the time we have. The choice to do nothing is still a choice, just not the right one. All the great traditions teach, rightfully so, that faith without works is dead. We're here for a reason. All of us matter in this equation. All of us are spokes in the wheel. All of us are needed and necessary for it to turn. I never wanted this post, but it is the post that I was given, so I will man it and embrace it no matter what comes. If we stand together, undaunted and unyielding, we could even now accomplish profound good at this late hour. Only one way to find out. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific details on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard, make every day count. Until next week, we march on into the gathering storm. Never give up, ever. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.